Hola, hombres. Red-pilled biker here. And today's topic, for those who may be interested, is why do we cling to the dogmas that we cling to? And while it'd be easy to say, okay, the dogma we're going to refer to is the dogma of marriage and family and home and hearth and picket fences and life happily ever after and blah blah blah, but really I think it goes beyond that. I think the whole dogma that we cling to is the whole tradcon mindset. And tradcon, of course, as you know, simply means traditional conservative values. And don't get too hung up on that word conservative, because it's not really referring, it can, but it's not referring to a political leaning. If you were to talk to most left-leaning people, most blue state people, most people on the left, you would find that if you said, well, what do you want for your daughter? What do you want for your son? They would lay out all the typical stuff that all parents would, but ultimately at the end of the day, what they'd like to have is their child to be married and make them grandparents and all that. And you would say, well, how would they go about doing that? Well, they need to get educated and they need to get a good job and so forth and so on. And those are traditional conservative values. And, you know, being an old guy, I always thought they were pretty good values and, you know, would have liked to see them extend further. But the reality is, as I said in an earlier video, the meteor has hit the earth and it's all that stuff, the tradcon stuff has been vaporized. And yet, we hear it preached to us as if it's some sort of gospel truth. And so, why does something like the traditional conservative values, in this particular case, in our case as men, speaking more of long-term relationships and marriage and so forth, why is something that is so antiquated, so obviously flawed, and causes so much harm to men, why is it taking so long to die? And why are young men who have been steeped in watching this dogma be dismantled still signing up? You know, I see old guys doing this. You know, my father did. Good Lord, my mom died when my dad was 78, and he got remarried and was relatively happy for the next 7 years, I guess. But he was so steeped in the concept of not having a woman around was just too much for him. But I see it with divorced men. In my counseling practice, I had men who would have 2, 3, 4 divorces, and I'd be counseling with them, and they're wanting to find another wife. It is unbelievable. If I didn't know better, I would say it's almost an addiction, but it's a hardcore dogma that is very, very difficult for men to break. And but young men who have watched in my day and age, guys, meeting a kid whose parents were divorced was an odd thing. Really. They're just, parents stayed married. Where they were happy or not, I can't tell you. I would say probably not. But it was very odd. But these young kids, I haven't met, I can't remember the last time I met an adult child. Sounds like a conflict to me, way I put that. But, you know, 18, 19, 20-year-olds that came from an intact household. Really, I haven't met too many even in their 30s and 40s who came from an intact household. So it's obviously been a dogma that's been on its deathbed for quite some time. And yet these same young men are lining up at some courthouse somewhere, inviting the state into their lives. So in 7, 15, 20 years, they can be stripped of everything that they've worked for and that they've held to be valuable. So I don't understand that, and I don't understand why we're still talking about things like the great fairy tale of soulmates. I hear to this day young people use that term soulmate, and it's just amazing. You're like, well, it never did exist, and it damn sure doesn't exist now. So why is this dogma of traditional conservative values so incredibly entrenched into our lives? Why is it so entrenched even into the minds of people who ought to know better? And I really speak here to young men who have watched their parents go through divorces, maybe numerous, and old men of my own age who, after a divorce or whatever, go out and do that shit again and again and again. Part of the reason it's entrenched is because in the past it did work. It actually did work. You got married, you worked as a team, you bought the house, you paid off the house, you hit 62, you retired, you took your pension, your Social Security, whatever it was, and you lived out happily. Your kids went on, you could afford to send them to a nice state college or a good tech school. They went out and got good jobs, and that worked very well for quite some time. And now it's not working, but we want to hang on to these things. So why are we still hanging on to it? It's fear. Men are fearful, and that's why they keep reverting back to something they know has failed, which is these traditional conservative values of getting married and having a wife and having a family and doing all that stuff. It doesn't work anymore, guys. I don't see it working anywhere, and yet all day long, and it keeps the divorce attorneys hopping. They make buku bucks because of our own stupidity. So why is this stuff still entrenched? Why is it so deeply part of the American, really, male psyche? I don't think it matters what country you're in. And I think it has to do with it. We want structure. We think freedom and choice brings us an incredible amount of happiness, and really it doesn't. It actually lowers our happiness. We want to minimize our choices in life because it can be very overwhelming. So we're seeking structure. But unfortunately, the building in which we're trying to live has been falling down and crumbling for a whole long time, and so we're going to have to develop a whole new structure. We have this illusion of permanence, even though from the very beginning of time, when consciousness finally arose upon this planet, we could see that things are not permanent. And if you think I'm wrong, all you got to do is buy a car, let it sit out in the yard, use it, and you will see within 5 years it does not look like the same vehicle. Get a kitty cat. Love that kitty cat. Kiss on that kitty cat. Give that kitty cat cute little belly rubs. In about 12, 13, 15 years, if you're lucky, you're going to be burying that thing in your backyard. There isn't anything permanent. And yet we cling to that permanence, and we're like, if we just get a deep enough dogma going, then there will be permanence. We also want to have our safe place. It's a protective agency. If we have enough dogma built around us, then, and we have enough people in that dogma believing the way we do, it creates a safe space. It's how tribal traditions were born. It's how religions have survived. It's how, and it's a good thing. It's been a good thing. And I would say the dogmas that we live by weren't necessarily negative things. They just don't function anymore. Go back to my example of a car. You have that car, it works very, very well for you. Situations change in your life, and that car no longer functions for you the way it needs to. You buy a little sports car, you're running around that sports car, you're having a good time. All of a sudden you decide to become a welder. Well, you know what? The pickup truck may be more in line with what you need to have because you're not attaching that welder to the back of your sports car. Another thing is, we just like to be right. There's something about it. We like to be right. And if we get involved in a dogma, we see this very much among the different religions out there, especially among Christianity and the 23,000 different brands of Christianity out there. First thing they'll do is sit down and write out an incredible hardcore dogma, and then you memorize that dogma and you don't believe anything but that dogma. So all you have to do is quote dogma and you get to be right without having to put any thought or effort into it. I guess you could say dogma is the lazy man's way of feeling intelligent. But the number one reason we hang on to these dogmas comes out of our fear of isolation. We still have that high school mentality. Remember your number one fear in high school? It was being rejected. It was being cast out. It was being isolated. It's still our number one fear. And there's evolutionary reasons for it, because the caveman who got kicked out of the cave, kicked out of the tribe, went out and starved to death. So our number one fear, reason we won't let this go, because if you choose to take a red pill and really begin to analyze your dogmas, you will become isolated. You will become separate from society. A single man is not going to be as accepted as readily. Maybe in your 20s, early 30s, you could pull this off. But when you become a single man in your 40s or 50s or 60s, people will begin to distrust you because you're not playing by the rules of the game. Bottom line here, guys, if you want to truly break away and dismantle the dogma that has been planted into your mind, if you want to break away from the trad con dogma that has been preached at you, and I don't care what religion you are, I don't care what color you are, I don't care what political persuasion you are, you have been saturated with this. The bottom line is this, guys. What is it going to take? What is it going to take to break away from this? One word: courage. Guys, life is hard. Do not make it any harder than it needs to be. Keep it real.